Mick, great to be here in the factory. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the factory at the moment. So a lot of aircraft being built behind us.
Yeah, it's a really busy time actually. It's really picked up in the last 4 or 5 months. We've got a lot of orders for aircraft going through the factory now. A couple of 170s going out to flight schools, which is fantastic. I love seeing that. And some private owners picking up 230s in the not too distant future. So yeah, really exciting times.
So you recently just came back from Oshkosh. How was the Oshkosh experience?
Yeah, Oshkosh was fantastic. Really exciting to spend time wandering around and just seeing the scale of it is amazing, as you know. And
so you got your step count up?
I got my step count up. The steps were really good. The food intake not so good, so we'll work on that balance. But yeah, no, really exciting times, and particularly this year, the announcement by Secretary Duffy that the Mosaic regulations have been signed off. So that was a really exciting time, and I was at that press conference. A lot of excitement around the manufacturing community and the general aviation community as well.
Talk to us a little bit about the announcement, the Mosaic announcement.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a revolutionary step. You know, it's almost as big a step as the initial announcement of Light Sport in 2004. And so it really does expand recreational aviation in a really significant way. It really, in the US system, it divides into 3. There's the new rules around recreational pilots, there's new rules around recreational aircraft, and there's new rules around maintenance. So for pilots, it lets them fly pretty much anything, any fixed wing aircraft, up to 4 seats and up to a 59 knot clean stall speed. And for aircraft, again, the limitations are pretty much a 61 knot dirty stall speed and a 4-seat limitation. And beyond that, you can have pretty much any number of engines, any type of engines, heavy an aircraft as you please, et cetera, et cetera. So it really does open up the opportunities for aviation manufacturers.
Is there there's a fixed deadline too, isn't there, with Mosaic?
Yeah, there is. So the piloting requirements will come in 3 months. So that's in October of this year of 25. And then the manufacturing requirements come live in July of 26. So there's a lot to do to get to that July 26 period. First, the industry has to prepare new standards for the aircraft through the ASTM facility. So that will happen pretty quickly, I suspect. FAA has then got to accept those standards, which will take another period of time, and then industry has to show compliance to those new standards. So just to get to the starting line in 12 months' time, there's an awful lot of work for us to go through. And I suppose one of the little interesting things is that the old standards will no longer apply. So we can't just keep building the same aircraft all the way through. We have to have new models available come July of 26.
So does that mean for Jabiru there'll be like a crossover time between the old and the new, or we'll still continue to build sort of like the models to the older standard as well as the M standard?
Yeah, so we'll keep building aircraft to the D models, to the current standard for the Australian market, for other international markets. For the US market, we'll have the M models available for July of 26, and they'll meet the new standards. We have to see exactly what those standards look like and how much the D is similar to the M and what the differences are. And at some point we'll sort of rationalise that, I hope. But for the time being, that's the approach we're taking.
So what is that going to mean for people who have like an existing D model? Will they be able to upgrade that to an M?
Yeah, probably not easily. We've in the Mosaic requirements, in theory, allow that to happen, but the complexity of that with different sets of standards, whether that's going to be practical, we're not really sure until we see the standards, but we think that's going to be a fairly long and expensive path. It's not our first priority. We'll see what happens and how that pans out. But it's certainly not going to be an easy thing to do, and it's certainly not going to be a blanket allowance for older models to go up to the increased weights.
Do you think that other statutory authorities are going to follow suit fairly quickly with the FAA?
We'd love to think so, but I suspect the reality is that the FAA has taken such a large leap with Mosaic that other national authorities are going to have trouble following that in its entirety. I certainly hope that there'll be some quick wins, that that other authorities can take. And here in Australia, the obvious example is the Group G allowance for RAA that takes up 760. It'd be nice that the light sport could align with that at 760 pretty quickly, even under the existing standards. So yeah, I hope, they're complex things putting rules like this in place, and we've seen through the Mosaic process how complex and how difficult that is to do. So we don't underestimate how hard that will be for other authorities to pick up, but certainly given the FAA lead, we hope there'll be some follow on pretty quickly for their other authorities.
Europe, will we go to some sort of a type certification then?
Yeah, so Europe at the moment still has light sport aircraft as a type certified class. And from a Jabiru business model, that just doesn't fit our business model. So we won't be pursuing light sport in Europe as it currently stands. If those rules change, we'll reconsider that. Some of the European countries and the UK are changing their rules around ultralight, what they class as ultralight, and lifting the weight limits there. And potentially we can see the 170 fitting into the ultralight category there. And if that's the case, then we'll look at the market and we'll work with our dealers in those countries to see if we can bring the 170 in as a factory built. But for the time being, Europe largely for us is experimental kit builds.
How do you see Mosaic impacting and affecting the international dealer network?
I think our dealer network is pretty adept at rule changes and dealing with local rules and how it all works. So it's not a huge difference for them. Obviously for our US dealers, there's going to be a lot of change coming through, and we're working very closely with them to make sure that happens. But by and large, it's just another rule change, and for the dealer's perspective, and we'll work through them with that.
So with the US market leading the change, so here in the factory we'll still produce the D model and also produce the M model as well?
Yes, yeah, side by side. So, again, I don't think there's going to be large visual changes to the aircraft. Changes will be mostly in the structural parts and that sort of thing. So, yes, we'll continue to build both models out of the factory.
Talk to us about the M model. So talk to us about the difference and sort of what you sort of see is going to change with the M model.
Yeah. So what Mosaic does for us is two things really. One is it allows us to lift the max takeoff weight, and for us that's all about useful load. So we're going to increase the useful load on all of the models. That's what the M will allow. And then the second thing allows us for us to factory build aircraft that we haven't been able to in the past. So our first priority will be the 170 and the 230/430. We'll be looking at lifting the max takeoff weights for those two aircraft. We'll look at what changes that means and thing, but we really want to get to the point where you can pretty much fill your boots in terms of payload. So we can put two 90 kilogram pilots in, or two 200-pound pilots. We can fill full fuel, and we've still got room for some useful luggage. So that's where we want to get to, and that's what we'll be working on. And then the other thing, of course, is that we can factory build more models. So we'll be able to factory build the 430. We're looking at bringing the 160 back because the 160 now fits back into light sport, and certainly the twin aircraft would be able to be factory built. So we could end up with 5 models, all factory built, all M models at this stage.
I'm guessing people who sort of have a real soft spot for the 160 will be very happy to hear that.
There's certainly a cohort who think the 160 was the perfect Jabiru. And so, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a few people who'll be interested in seeing that come back. It's the same fuselage effectively as the 170, but it's got a shorter wing. It flies a little more directly. It doesn't float quite so much as the 170. And so it's a personal preference thing, but some people will certainly go for the 160, I suspect.
So with the new M models, does that mean there's going to be some internal changes as well too?
Yeah, it will certainly give us a lot more flexibility in what we can do in terms of payload. So, again, that more usable payload and how our owners want to use that will be largely up to them. But it will give us a broader ability to fit out panels. We're working with BRS to put the first ballistic parachute in our aircraft in the States. So, it gives us the opportunity to put ballistic parachutes in. It gives us the opportunity for constant speed propellers. So, there's all these things that we can now do that we couldn't do as a factory build under light sport. So that's exciting. It's all going to take time. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of compliance to be done, but it opens the path up to a lot of those things.
I'm guessing, so a lot of people will be happy to hear about the ability to have a CSU.
There are pros and cons, obviously, for everything, and people will make their own minds up about that. I suspect, largely for the 160, 170, people will stick with a fixed pitch prop. Just the variability isn't enough to really make it worthwhile. But certainly the 230, the twin, the 430 the constant speed prop will offer something, and it will offer, especially if we're upping the weights, then it'll get our takeoff range back. It'll give us better cruise and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think it's an exciting opportunity. We'll see how the market reacts to those sorts of things.
Any changes to the engine under Mosaic?
Well, we've talked a bit before about the electric fuel injection. That's a bit of work that's in progress at the moment. We've prototyped, we've flown the prototype. That's gone really well. We're working now through the production process with an Australian partner to get a production system that's repeatable, that we can sell as part of a light sport arrangement. And then we've got to go through a certification process, and of course we're waiting to see what the new standards are that we can certify that engine against. So there's still a fair bit of work to be done in that process, but we're working through that. And now we have a hard deadline of July 26th to have that engine ready for sale. So that's what we're working to.
Is there a little bit of chicken and egg if the final changes and final rollout of Mosaic is going to be a little different to the standard?
Yeah, there's a bit of risk there that we're taking in advancing to the standards we know, and we've been part of the standard writing process, and we've been involved with the ASTM committees. So we have a reasonable idea of where we think it's heading. There's always some risk at the end of the day that it'll come out as something different. We'll have to deal with that. But I think for our aircraft, our aircraft are pretty straightforward, pretty simple aircraft. The real practical changes, shouldn't be too big.
So when do you sort of expect that we'll start doing production runs for the fuel injection?
Yeah, I'm sort of hopeful we'll see the first engines coming out by the end of 25,
Okay.
And that may be into the experimental market rather than the light sport. Certainly we need to be up and running by July of next year, by July 26. So that's a hard deadline for us to have that engine available.
Yeah. So, and talking about engines, talk about engines stand today in terms of reliability.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the reliability of the Gen 4 engines. I think they're performing really well in service. We're seeing that. The Jabiru Approved Maintainers course that we ran recently really enforced that feedback to me. We've done a lot of work looking at the statistics that are available to us, and we've put those up on our website, so anyone can go and look at that. And what that tells us at the moment, when we use the Australian market as our kind of test bed, is that all the generations of Jabiru engines are performing at about the same reliability as the rest of the fleet. And I think that's good from a statistical point of view. Anecdotally, what we kind of understand is that Gen 4 is certainly the best of that in terms of reliability, which they should be. And that's great. So we're not at the end of that journey. We'll continue to work on that. And as we introduce changes to the engine, the fuel injection, that sort of thing, then that gives us an opportunity to go back through our endurance testing and revisit all those things that we've got our eye on. It's not a quick process, but it's a thorough process. And so I think we will just slowly chip away and continue to produce more and more reliable engines.
Yeah. Now, you recently put out a service bulletin for the crankshaft.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple problem, really. There's been a lot of opinion thrown around about the real problem, but the actual problem is pretty simple. What we found was that the heat treatment of the crankshafts, we couldn't guarantee that the heat treatment had been thorough all the way through the cranks. And so there's a very small risk of a crankshaft failure. So out of abundance of caution, we've brought all those crankshafts back. We're replacing them with new ones. We've changed the manufacturing process for the new crankshafts to take that problem away, so we can be very certain of the material properties of the crankshaft, and every expectation that that'll be a proper solution. So it took us a while to gear up to that. Obviously, there was a big rush. I think now we're into a place of a fairly continuous drumbeat of replacing crankshafts. It's going quite well as far as I can tell, and it's good. I hope what people take away from it is that we're never going to be perfect, but when we do find an issue, we'll address it, we'll find a solution for it, and we will look after people who are the owners and pilots of Jabirus, and that's where we want to get to.
How is Jabiru supporting owners and operators of Jabiru Aircraft?
Yeah, well, the first thing we want to do is, and I think what most people are interested in is availability of their aircraft. They want to go flying when they go flying. So, the first thing we're really focused on is the spare parts, making sure that we've got parts availability for all the legacy engines and aircraft and for our current fleets, and that's not always perfect, but we manufacture most of our own spares. So, we're never far away from being able to produce and provide spares. So that's our first piece of focus. The second piece is around our Jabiru approved maintainer courses.
We ran the first one this year.
Yeah, we ran the first one this year, that's right. And, it went really well. I think we've got Pete Cawthorne running that for us and leading that process for us. Pete's an ex-Qantas lamey, so he comes in really well qualified, and he's a Jabiru owner, so he knows the part. So Pete ran the first course. We brought Jason out from the US to provide another point of view. We had about a dozen L2s and lamies come in and run that course. I think it's really good. I think out of that we'll get maybe 3 of our first Jabiru approved maintainers, and they'll be scattered around the country, and they'll provide a place for owners to go where they can be assured that they're getting the latest information, that they're getting the factory backup, and that they're kind of getting what we consider to be the right processes for maintenance and things. So hopefully that will raise the maintenance quality across the board, and not quality in the sense of they're better, but quality in the sense of standardized processes, standardized things, and that will improve everything. The other really important thing for me about that is that the factory is getting better information coming back to us. So we're getting people who understand what we're trying to do, and they're feeding back the information of what they're seeing in the field and the problems they're seeing in the field, and that will allow us to better address
That's a great
those
feedback
issues.
loop, isn't it?
It's fantastic, and it's an informed and consistent feedback loop. So we get a lot of feedback, but a lot of it isn't particularly useful because we just don't understand the context of the way it's coming. Whereas this is very much a process that I think that will really help us in the long term. And then the third thing is just the work we're doing on the website. We're building a member section there where people will have access to information, regular news updates, and all that sort of thing. So communicating back to the Jabiru family as much as we can and thinking. So that's a bit of a work in progress, but we're getting there on that as well.
How many jam courses are you looking to run each year? And like, how do people, like, someone wants to come and attend a jam course, how do they do that?
Yeah, we're looking probably at running the jam course annually. And so, we just get in touch with us and we'll put you on the list for the next course. Pete's also looking at running some owner maintainer courses.
And they'll be slightly different to the jam course?
Exactly, because the jam course is really aimed at people who are already qualified and trained in maintenance. The owner maintainer courses will be at a more general level. But we're looking at how we'd run that in terms with the work that RAA is doing as well in lifting that, the owner maintainer education. So we'll work closely with RAA on that.
What's your strategy for parts availability and pricing, especially for older aircraft?
Yeah, so as I walked down to the shed this morning, Chris was out with his Bluetooth in his ear, running around the spare parts area and talking to a customer live and checking. So we're not computer says yes or no people. Chris will go out and check that the part's available, and if it is, then we'll pop it in a DHL bag and have it to you in a day or two. So that's very much our approach to spares. Because we manufacture most things ourselves. If the spares aren't on the shelf, which they usually are, but if they're not, then they're not far away. We can build to order.
And the team are really good too in terms of being able to identify the fact that stock is getting low, aren't they? They've been doing this for such a long time.
And that's right. The team's so experienced and so knowledgeable across. They embarrass me frequently about knowledge. So the team is so knowledgeable about what the stock looks like and we keep a really good eye on it and a really a really effective way, I think, of just having spares availability. And we're committed to sparing the legacy fleet as well, engines and aircraft, and making sure that people can keep in the air.
Yeah, and I guess for the international clients and dealer networks, like the fact that you're constantly producing spares all the time means that you can actually ship stuff overseas really quickly as well.
Yeah, and most of our dealers hold a pretty good stock of the common spares, so they're able to support as well. But again, in this day and age, a DHL bag only takes a week to get anywhere in the world, and so we can be pretty prompt in providing those spares.
How do you ensure that Jabiru will be here to support our aircraft 20 or 30 years from now? That's a big question.
That is a big question. But I think it's all about the company culture, and the company culture has always been committed to aviators and owners and making flying affordable and making flying available and accessible. And if we keep doing that, then I think absolutely the market will support us and will continue to be here. What Mosaic really does is gives us an opportunity to sort of step up to that plate and say, well, here are now a whole bunch of new opportunities for owners and pilots. Here are a whole bunch of new products that still have the classic Jabiru feel and the classic Jabiru underpinning foundations. But we can move ahead with technology, we can add things, we can bring new technologies in and still give people that experience. So I have every confidence that the business will be here well past my time and still producing great airplanes for people and great engines for people to go flying.
How are international tensions and supply chain issues affecting Jabiru's operations and pricing?
Well, we're pretty good at it now. I think the company's been through the GFC, the company's been through COVID, the company's been through various trade wars of various types of various countries. I think we've become pretty adept at dealing with those international supply chains. And again, I think because Jabiru does so much of its own manufacturing in-house, everything from machining screws to building full aircraft, that helps us deal with those issues much better than many other companies. And so we can manage our way through those situations. But yeah, world keeps changing and we just got to keep changing with it and making sure we can keep delivering.
So if someone's considering buying their first aircraft,
yeah,
why would they choose a Jabiru over, say, something like a 152?
Yeah, well, I think, the first thing is safety. The aircraft have got an outstanding safety record, and I think that's, if you're a fresh pilot or a new owner, then that's a really big thing to consider. And the second thing is that support. I think, you will get well supported. You'll get supported directly from the factory. And that means that you'll spend more time in the air because you won't be spending time looking at your aircraft in the hangar. And the third time is just the cost. We really focus on affordability. We really focus on keeping everybody in the air. And so those things are really the key, I think. And of course, probably the most important thing really is it's just a lovely airplane to fly and it's a really useful utility aircraft. So it just, for a generalist pilot, it's the perfect aircraft. Yeah.
And what about for flight schools? What's the business case for flight schools?
Yeah, I think for flight schools, very similar. Safety has got to be key, obviously, but it's a very good trainer. I think as an aircraft, the aircraft are easy to fly and safe to fly, but they really do teach you hand and stick, rudder and stick flying. So I think it's a good little trainer. And then again, for flying schools, it's all about the economics. So availability is key for flying schools, and perhaps even more so than the running costs, which are going to be better than anything going around. But the ability to keep that aircraft in the sky and to keep your students continuing to fly is a really big issue for the flying schools.
And that really sort of plays into the whole notion that, like, if your aircraft's down because of some sort of maintenance issue,
yeah,
then being able to get access to spares.
Then you're back in the air in pretty quick time, and we all know that things happen, and particularly in training environments, things go wrong. So the ability to get back in the air quickly, I think, is a really important one for flying schools.
And like for flying schools, like there's an excellent support network here at the factory as well too, isn't there? So
Yes.
really, really highly qualified and experienced staff.
The experience in the factory here is immense. And so that knowledge is there and available for people to tap into. And again, I go back to the Jabiru approved maintainers. We want to grow that network outside the factory. So people have got local support as well, and there's someone they can just, they don't have to get to Bundaberg, they can just get somewhere locally to get some really good knowledgeable advice and experience.
So ownership cost over 10 years as opposed to sort of like other options out in the market. What's that look like?
Yeah, I think it's probably different for everybody, and people need to do their own numbers on that. It depends very much on how much you fly and all those sort of good things. But it's easy to come and get the numbers off us. We're happy to share those, and I think talk to Kate about that. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the cost of ownership.
What are you really excited about?
When I first came into aviation in the late 80s, early 90s, it was that time when the ultralight boom was on. There were maybe 30 Australian companies all developing aircraft. It was a really exciting time. And I think we're back there again. And I think it was happening anyway with the eVTOLs and electric motors, and a whole bunch of new technologies coming in. But what Mosaic has done is really supercharged that and given us the license to go and really stretch. So I think it's another exciting time in aviation. We probably had the 80s, the late 80s. We had the first light sport around the early noughties, which was a big boom. And now we've got Mosaic and a whole lot of new technology happening, and from AI to all sorts of things that potentially could see their way in. And so that's a really, it's exciting time to be back in aviation.